This video will discuss some tips concerning how to write effective QA notes. It will also provide an overview of the process involved in returning a case to reviewers for additional edits before finalizing the case in the OMS. While QA notes are likely to be your primary method of communicating with reviewers during formal QA, remember that you can always talk directly with reviewers if necessary, either face-to-face or by phone. In fact, if the issues you encounter during QA are wide-ranging and affect multiple items, it may be far more efficient to have that conversation rather than to try to communicate everything you need to say through a QA note. When it comes to writing QA notes, though, there are some important things you'll want to keep in mind. First, it's important to remember that there are actually two different kinds of QA notes: item notes and case notes. Item notes are QA notes that are attached to any one of the three distinct pages that make up each OSRI item in the OMS. We also consider notes added to the face sheet to be item notes. Those pages are the applicability page, the questions page, and the rating page. Item notes should be used to provide feedback on some specific element of that item that is relevant to that page. For example, if there are 4 individuals in the case who could possibly be considered parents, but reviewers identify only 2 of them as applicable on Item 8's applicability page without providing any explanation as to why they are applicable but the others are not, you would want to add an item note requesting that narrative explanation. Case QA notes, on the other hand, should be used to provide feedback to reviewers that is more global in nature. In other words, relevant to multiple items across the instrument. For example, if you're finding a lot of proper names incorrectly included in narrative statements, you might add a case note instructing reviewers to rerun the proper names report and then carefully read through their answers for proper names that should not be included. You can only add case notes in the OMS by clicking the Case QA Notes link that's permanently docked at the top of the left-hand navigation bar. Note that clicking this link will display all of the QA notes, including item notes, that have been added to the case. Regardless of the type of QA note you're writing, you should keep in mind certain best practices to make them as useful as possible in providing guidance to reviewers. First, you should use each QA note's subject line to give it a clear title that indicates its focus. Don't just title it "Something to Correct," in other words. Be specific. You should also restrict the focus of each QA note to one single idea or concept that reviewers can correct and then add a response indicating it's complete. If you identify multiple issues that need to be addressed on any given page, then you should add multiple QA notes that each address one of them. The QA note itself should be as simple and to the point as you can make it, with clear instructions on what you need to see in order for the issue you identified to be addressed. And remember, for particularly complex or recurring issues, you can always add a QA note as a placeholder and then indicate to reviewers that you want to schedule a follow-up conversation. As a QA staff person, you can't make edits to the information collected in the OSRI. This means that once you've completed your review of the case and added all necessary QA notes, you must return the case so that the reviewers can make all necessary revisions. As they do, the reviewers should also be responding to each of your QA notes with their own, confirming that the issue identified has, in fact, been corrected. After reviewers have addressed all of the case's QA notes and responded to each one, they will repeat the process they initially used to submit the case for QA. That is, they should review their completed work one more time, then run the proper names report to confirm that no proper names are included outside of the face sheet tables. Once that's complete, they'll submit the case for QA and you will once again read through it. Be sure to read the QA notes that reviewers left in response to yours. While most of these will simply be confirmations that the revisions you requested were made, some may have additional questions or describe revisions that weren't necessarily what you asked for, If you do not see a response to a QA note you added, that should be a red flag that reviewers did not actually address the note. Most of the time, though, you'll then read over the revisions that reviewers made and determine if they're acceptable, and if they are, you'll mark the QA note as resolved. While this does not actually delete the QA note, it indicates to other readers that this particular QA note has no further issues that must be addressed. Ideally, you will only need to send a case back to reviewers once for revision. However, if there are still issues that need to be addressed after the case is returned to you, you can add more QA notes as necessary and once again return the case to reviewers. This back and forth process can continue as long as necessary until the case is finalized. But remember, a face-to-face or phone conversation can be a much more efficient way of handling this process. This concludes the Conducting QA Staff video series. Thank you for watching.